I love the way Chileans speak Spanish. I remember after my mission, I had a job where I kind of knocked doors in Texas, and so I'd run into a lot of Hispanic people. And when I would speak Spanish to them, they would say, "You sound like a Chilean." And so it was cool to see this kind of very specific dialect that they have in Chile. A couple things that I remember, they always cut the S's off their words. A lot of stuff is slurred together and almost kind of said with a whine that to me became very endearing. You see like a niece or nephew or a child, and they're kind of, "Oh, come on, Ma." It's a very endearing type of way of speaking this kind of Spanish language. And so another thing about Chilean Spanish is they put po at the end. They would, and it didn't mean anything, but they would just put the letter po at the end. ¿Cómo está, po, loco? ¿Qué vamos a hacer, po? So it was just kind of a thing that they did, and they just put po at the end. And I remember when I first got there, I was so confused, feeling like I didn't learn that word, or I didn't learn what is that conjugation, and then I finally figured out that po is just a thing that they kind of throw into everything. I'm just trying to think of a phrase I could say that helped me remember. I remember, like, "Hola, Elder, ¿cómo está, loco?" And I remember hearing that for the first time, like, "¿Cómo está, loco?" It's all so, it's not, but you kind of figure it out, and it's very, like I say, it's very endearing, and something I came to love. And so I remember when I got home from a mission, I heard other people speak Spanish, other native speakers, I was like, whoa, I can understand everything that they're saying. And so I loved learning Spanish in Chile because it helped me kind of really focus in and listen and help me kind of learn Spanish better, for me anyway.
So Chilean Spanish is crazy and it's fun, but it takes a really long time. I probably didn't understand anything my first about 3 months, I would say, but I was a lot slower than most. It just was hard for me to understand. But even the Latins that come to the mission just have a really hard time at first understanding what's going on. Chileans are really proud of their language, and they know it's really bad. I mean, you'll hear all the time. You'll say something in Chilean, and they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, we have the worst Spanish," and they're just so proud of it. It's cute. And an experience I had with it was that when I first got to the mission, somebody told me, they said, "Make sure that you learn proper Spanish and don't learn Chilean Spanish." And I remember just thinking about it that night, and this was a personal decision, but I realized that I wasn't there to learn Spanish. I was there to be Chilean, and I was there to learn their language, because that was the important thing, was that I could communicate with them, and I was called to serve the Chileans. And I decided to learn Chilean Spanish, and it was so fun. Did I learn it perfectly? And should you always speak in really Chilean Spanish? No. But when I would speak in their accent and just say their idioms, I can't remember how to say that word in English, but when you do that, they just feel so special. Like, it's such a great way to reach out to them, to speak in their own language and speak in their own tongue. And but their pronunciation is just terrible, and they don't say their S's, and they don't really say their D's a lot of the time, and so it ends up and they have this weird sing-songy way of talking where they just say, like, "Haga lo que tú queráis," and other Latins just have no idea what that means, and it's fun, but it is really hard to understand. Advice I would give about learning the language would definitely be to read the Book of Mormon in Spanish, and do it as soon as you can. When I very first got to the mission president had the whole mission read the Book of Mormon in the other language, and we had to do it in a month. And that was really hard for me because I only had about a month or two in the mission, but it increased my ability to speak Spanish so much. And there's just so many words that are so fun that other countries, I would have Argentine companions or Peruvian companions, and it would just be so hard for them to learn the new words, but But when they did, it really helped us to teach the Chileans.
In all of South America, each country has a different dialect slightly of Spanish. I mean, they all understand each other. The best way that I've found to explain it is like the difference between American English and British English. Like, it's the same language, it's just they have different words, like, you know, lorry, lift, trousers, and we have different words for all those things: pants, truck, elevator. So it's the same language, it's just different wording. In Chile, it's even more so a little bit. They have what they call the COA. So if you understand anything about Spanish, you know that there's the to form. It's como estás, no puedes, and it's, you know, pretty straightforward. But in Chile, at least like those who don't speak perfect Spanish, they'll start speaking in the COA, and instead of saying como estás, they'll say como estáis. And instead of saying no puedes, they'll be like no podí, and they just like add e to the end of everything. And it was interesting to like try and make sense of that, because there were some things that they say that are almost the exact opposite of what Spanish should be, and so they it made no sense in my head when I heard it the first time. And it like took me several times of hearing the same phrase over and over again to be like, oh, that's what they mean by that. And they use animals to describe lots of things. Like in English, they'll say people are like pig-like, they eat like a pig, but they'll also be like, oh, that guy is echando la yegua, which is like throwing the jaguar, which means he's just sprawled out being lazy all day. And to be a rooster is to be really, really cowardly, and they just used animals to describe people so much. No, it's like old McDonald's farm, really. They just use animals in every description. They speak really fast. Like the Spanish they teach you in the MTC is not the Spanish you will be speaking. They speak really fast. They drop their S's a lot of the time, and their D's. So, you know, instead of saying más o menos or estoy cansado, it's oh, más o menos, más estoy cansado. Like, it's like almost mumbled, and you have to lean forward and think like, wait, what? Can you repeat that for me, please? And so the language is kind of difficult, especially when you're speaking with more common folk. Because like the lower down the social ladder you go, like the worse it gets. Just a fun fact: the biggest insult you can give somebody is calling them a big egg. It's kind of interesting. Like, it's terrible in Chile, but I just think it's funny. Like, my companions and I, when we get together nowadays, like, we'll be speaking in English and call each other a big egg, and we'll just laugh. But in Chile, like, that is a terrible insult. So don't ever call anybody a big egg.
Oh my goodness, Chilean Spanish is not like anything else you'll ever find. It's like it's all its own language, and they're so proud of that. They love to just flaunt it to the world that we're Chilenos and we speak different, so don't even mess. I don't know. It's great. I mean, I love it. I love Chilean Spanish. I think it's beautiful, but it's pretty, I guess it's kind of choppy. They have a lot of their own vocab words that they've just kind of made up. They have their own conjugations that they've kind of made up. So I mean, you'll learn in the MTC and then you'll get out there and be like, what? I didn't hear that before, but it's great.
Well, Chilean Spanish is 100% different from real Spanish. And Chileans know it too. They'll say how bad their Spanish is. Their grammar is bad. The way they write is bad. It's very fun and it's interesting. And a lot of missionaries get into it. They start to adapt to the Chilean Spanish. They start using their vocabulary, sometimes way too much. But Chilean Spanish is so different. It's once you get there, you won't understand what they're saying. If you didn't know Spanish before, and even if you did, you'll get there and you won't understand what they're saying. I remember sitting on a train with two new elders. One was from Ecuador, and the other one was from Colombia. They arrived with me. And I could barely understand them, but the conversation that we muscled out was, I told them I can't understand what the Chileans are saying. And they just told me, us either. We can't understand them either, because they speak just, the elderly people speak differently from the younger people, and the middle-aged people, they speak differently too. And people in the north speak different from people in the south, and they all come to Santiago. So it's just, you don't know, like, one day you're talking with a Colombian, and then the next day you're speaking with a Chilean from the north, and you're speaking with a Peruvian the next day, then a Chilean from the south, and someone from Argentina, then someone from Spain. So at first it's just, wow, what Spanish am I supposed to use? Because they don't understand. I don't know. It was just way funny. But the Chileans, they're Spanish. They have a lot of types of Chilean Spanish. There's flaite, that's like more like what the younger delinquents use. It's more like just gangster slang. And then the older people will use just like ancient words that haven't been used in over 50 years, that the young people don't even know. So once you're speaking with someone that's a little bit more, that's a senior citizen, that's more elderly, they have a different vocabulary. And there's just the accent is so funny. They speak really fast, and they don't move their tongue a lot. They don't pronunciate very well. So, for example, the most famous thing that Chileans use, or that they say that's just funny for new elders and sisters at first, once they first arrive, is, once you ask someone, ¿Cómo estás? Like, how are you? They'll say, más o menos no más po. Like, they'll say like, más o menos no más po. So that means more or less, and then po is just like a filler. They just say it. It doesn't mean anything. It's just something to say, just to finish off the sentence. And so instead of saying más o menos, they'll say más o menos no más po. They'll just they won't pronounce the S. Everything's put together. So that's hard at first, but once you leave Chile at the end of your mission, you're speaking just like they are. Then you'll get to America and you'll speak with your friends from Mexico or Guatemala, Cuba, and they won't understand what you're saying, and you have to be very specific, especially when it comes to vocabulary, because Chile just uses a completely different dictionary. There's actually books that people write for Chilean Spanish, and it's just dictionary. It's a dictionary of slang, of phrases that they use, and I won't even start with some of the words because there's too many. There's so many Chilean words that I don't even know where to start. You'll just have to buy the book or arrive to Chile with an open mind to get all the words that they use. And you'll end up, after 2 years, speaking just like them. And they'll laugh at you because they'll just be so surprised at your language that they'll think, wow, you're speaking just like we do, but you're an American. How's an American using those words and speaking like that? So it's very interesting.
Chilean Spanish is really fun. So they usually cut their words. So for example, instead of ¿Cómo estás?, they say ¿Cómo estáis?. And so you just have to learn that they speak really fast and they shorten all of their words. And there are some people who speak more, I guess you could call it like slang, than others. And so you just, especially like in the poorer areas. But it's really fun. I don't know. They have lots of different words. I heard this one story where an American trainer was training another sister missionary who was Latina, and so she obviously spoke Spanish, but she came in and she didn't know the words that the Chileans were using, and so the American had to teach her the Spanish, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so just, I don't know, lots of different words like pololo. Nobody uses that word. That just means boyfriend, but other people would say novio. Just little things like that.
So as far as the language goes, I feel like I can give at least one little tip for, or one or two tips for getting the accent down. I'm not an expert in the accent, but I did learn from Chileans who taught me, hey, do this and you'll sound a little bit more native. One is that a lot of Americans, we accent the R's too much. We say them almost too hard, I guess. So if missionaries can make their R's a little bit softer in the words, they'll sound a little more native. For example, if you want to say correr, like a new beginner might say correr, like at the end with a really hard R. But if you just make it a little bit softer, it'll sound more Chilean, I guess. But then another Chilean sister also told me that they don't say their S's very often. I can't think of an example. But missionaries can look for that and just kind of leave off the S's in their words and sound more Chilean.
So in normal Spanish, to ask how are you, you'd say ¿Cómo estás? In Chile, you'd say ¿Cómo estás? So they cut the S off of the T and then change the last S to like an I. So almost like vosotros. So it's like ¿Cómo estás? And then to ask how are you, you'd say ¿Cómo andas? Or ¿Cómo le va? In Chile, you say ¿Cómo andai? And they just kind of say that. Or if it's an IR verb, and like if they're asking what do you want, in normal Spanish they say ¿Qué quieres? And in Chile they say ¿Qué querí? So just little things like that where you don't understand it unless you've been there a while, because even if you study the grammar, they don't speak, it's not that they don't speak good grammar, it's that they just have slang. So, and then there's like guacho pelado means like bald baby, but that's like, to them it's like, flight is also Spanish, I guess. So what's an English word for, it's like not thug or gangster, but like ruffian per se. That's a horrible way to describe it, but you know what I mean because you speak Spanish. So they just have these little, like, tons of words that only Chileans understand. So like when I'm here in the States and I'm speaking Spanish to someone from Mexico or another country, I have to like think in my head, is that Chilean or Spanish? So like a lot of times in Chile, I'd ask the Chileans, like, is this word a Chilean word or a Spanish word? And almost every time it was Chilean. So your Spanish, you're gonna have to like curb it when you come home, to because most of the people in the States are from Mexico or other Central American countries. So other than just a lot of slang and different words for different things in other countries, there's nothing big except they talk super fast, so you can't understand them anyway. And they use po a ton. So they say, hola po, ¿cómo estás po? Bien po. They say po like to everything. So that's the biggest Chilean idiosyncrasy is po, and they talk super fast and cut their S's a lot. They call it Castellano. Well, that's all Latin American countries. They call it Castellano instead of Espanol because they want to be not Spanish, just like we don't like the British here. They don't like the Spanish over there. Side note, when Chile beat Spain in the World Cup, it was nuts. Everybody flipped just because it wasn't only the World Cup, but Spain was the #1 team. And anyway, back to Spanish. They speak super fast. My brother served in Santiago, in the capital, and I don't even understand him. Like, he's talking to me and I don't know what he's talking about, just because he was in like the poorer parts of Santiago, sort of like the gangster parts, and he just goes hard on it. Like, he uses so much slang that and I was in like, even Concepcion, though I was in a richer part and by the university, or I was in farming towns. So I didn't notice a huge difference anywhere I was in my mission, but Matt was in the capital, and especially the poorer parts of the capital. So that's the only difference I've noticed in language between even me and other missionaries, or me, like the other Chileans I've met, because I was all over my mission. They talk the same, except my brother, people from Santiago, talk pretty different. Like, I can't understand them. So that's the only language difference between Chileans that I've noticed.